guys, it's Jen here and welcome to Jen's Wild About Art. So today I'm doing a video on a watercolour painting of a beautiful dog. I found this dog on Unsplash, a reference photo from Unsplash, which is a royalty-free photograph site. And it's a Weimaraner, and they are the most beautiful breed of dog. I've had a few friends who've owned these kinds of dogs, and they've got the most magnificent eyes on them. They're a tan colour, or they can be a red colour, and they have the most brilliant orangey gold eyes. So I thought I just really wanted to draw and paint this little guy. So I'm using my Sennelier and my Schminke watercolours. So I've just drawn the outline in, and now I'm going in with a very thin wash of yellow ochre, and I'm taking that around his whole face. I'm putting a slightly thicker wash around his ears and sort of spreading that out around his face. And then I take a little bit of grey and I drop that in while it's still wet into the shadow areas. So that I will soften that. It looks quite strong coloured now, but I do wet it down and smooth it out a bit, so it's not quite so sort of striking looking. It's not quite such a contrast. So I just dampen my brush and I move the edges around to soften it right up. So then for his nose, I pop in a little bit of Caput Mortuum, which is a wonderful, useful colour. I can use that for lots of things. So yeah, it's a wonderful skin tone for their nose because they're not quite black and they're not quite brown. They've got a little bit of pink in, and Caput Mortuum's perfect for it. So then I pop a bit of grey around the trim of his mouth and a bit of Caput Mortuum just in where his lip droops a little bit. And then for his eyes, I'm going in with a gold, Aussie gold, and I'm running that, run that around his eyes. And then for his pupils, I'm popping in a bit of grey, and I sort of wet it there and mess it up a bit, but I can just blot that out with a damp brush. So now I'm taking the Aussie gold around his ears, and it adds a bit of warmth to the colour of his coat. So just a very damp wash, so quite thin, and I take that around all his warm areas, so around his muzzle, around the top of his head, around his chin. And then I go back in and I start to define his eyes, and I add a little bit more grey, so this is a Payne's grey diluted. And I take this around his face, around the trim of his eyes, just to define them. Then I go back into his nostrils and darken those right up. And then just the trim of the front of his lips, and then around the edge of his eyes, just to give his eyes some definition. And then I go in with a little bit of red onto his nose, just to make that a bit more of a natural colour. I pop a bit of orange into his eyes, just into the gold in his eyes. It just makes them look like they've got little vessels in there. And then I go in with transparent sienna over the top of where I'd put the gold, and I just blend that out a bit with a damp brush. And those colours work beautifully well together. And I pop a few more shadows in with the Payne's grey. I just darken a few areas up around his ear, around his neck, and anywhere I can see that's dark on him. Then I do just under his chin, bit more definition around his eye and his nose. And then I add a bit of burnt umber just around the top of his ears and around onto his shoulder. I just pop that in a few places, and yeah, it brings it all together just nicely. So quite a damp wash of burnt umber around the top of his face. Just onto that shadow side of his mouth and under his chin. And then I've got my ink pen, and I just popped the highlights in. It didn't really work very well, so I used a Posca pen in the end and just popped some highlights around his nostrils and around the edges of his eyes. And we're done. So I hope you enjoyed this painting of this little watercolour dog. It was really good fun, a real relaxing little painting to do. I'd love it if you click like and subscribe and click on the bell icon so you get notified when I release a new video. Yeah, I'd love to see you for the next video. Have an awesome day, and I'll catch you then. Okie doke. Bye.